Think about it. Think about it. Think about it.
And welcome once again to High School Basketball Weekly. Tim Morey alongside of my co-host this week, John Franzoni. And John, the basketball season is in full swing. We're in the holiday break, so to speak, and teams are kind of not playing a full schedule at this point in time. But we had some good games over this past week, and we're just going to recap them for you now. With respect to McCann Tech, on the girls' side, the Lady Hornets, they haven't played since December 19th. They had a game that was scheduled that was postponed. So their next game is coming up actually tomorrow night at Lee. And interesting, we talked off camera, John, this time of the year, when you were coaching at Drury, it's kind of a weird time when there's gaps in the schedule, and it's kind of like you wish you could get some games in, especially with school being out.
Right. It's nice to actually I was saying before, nice to go on the road during this time. Get your kids up, get them moving early in the day, and take a road trip. And McCann has one coming up on the 29th, playing at Lee. They've had 10 days to prepare with that game that was canceled, as you mentioned. So I'm sure Coach Kratz had some good time to work with his young team, get them ready for that contest, and go down to Lee and play a good opponent.
Right. Also, John, Drury as well, the Lady Blue Devils, they haven't played since they played Mount Greylock on December 19th. That was our game of the week last week, and they've got upcoming games against Wacona, and they travel to Lenox on Monday night. Wednesday, January 3rd. They're at Lenox against an undefeated Lenox Millionaire team that stands at 3-0. And this is a young team, John. I saw them in the tournament last year against Hoosick Valley, and they gave Hoosick Valley in the state tournament all they could handle. They had a nice young team, and you kind of saw that they were going to have a good team this year.
Yeah, Lenox was impressive in that game last year in the tournament. They had some really tough contributions from some freshmen and younger players. I'm sure it set them up for this good start at 3-0 this year. Looking at Drury's schedule, big one at home against Wacona tomorrow,
right,
and then going down to Lenox, and then they got 4 in a row at home against Pope Francis, Agawam, Monument, and Taconic. So that's a good stretch in your schedule. They'll play
right.
5 out of 6 at home. We got a little bit of a break this last week or so to hopefully get anybody that was injured healthy and go into this stretch. It's going to show a lot because those teams that are coming into Drury, I would say those are 5 tough games, and plus the Lenox game on the road. So this is going to be a real grow-up time for that young Drury team.
Right, it's an important stretch for this team, John. You indicated, and they're going to grow up real fast. So we're going to be looking to see how the Blue Devils respond to this challenge. Mount Greylock had one game. They're still playing a bit shorthanded due to illness and injury, et cetera. They lost to Pope Francis 60-23. And Maddie Powell was the leading scorer for Greylock. They're going to come back. Their next games are against the Pittsfield teams. They're going to play at Taconic and a tough Pittsfield team at home. But Coach Jacoby's had a bit of a rough stretch here, playing shorthanded with illness and injury.
Right, it's funny, we're talking about some of the teams that are getting a week or two break right now, not playing any games at all. And the team that probably could use that break is the Mount Greylock girls with all these injuries. We saw them play last week at Drury, and they were missing 4 of their top players, regular rotation players, and it's tough to compete when you're missing 4 of your rotation because we know depth is something that a lot of teams struggle with. So if you're missing those 4 either starters or first subs off the bench, it's a challenge. And we saw that the other night. Maddie Powell really stepped up and played the point that night, did some good things, but they were playing with 6 varsity players. Coach Jacoby told me before the game, so gave a few of his younger kids in a JV a chance to step up. But when you're playing against a team like Drury that's pressing and very aggressive on defense, that's a tough matchup. So hopefully the Greylock girls get a few of their players back. I think I heard the younger Drake girl was practicing again, so hopefully she's out there for the 2 Pittsfield games this week, and hopefully by the first week in January they're back to full strength.
Well, we'll wait to see how that turns out for Mount Greylock. Hoosick Valley the Lady Hurricanes had two very, very competitive, tough games over the past week. In the first one, they beat Wauconah in Cheshire 50-36, but it was a lot closer than the score indicates. John, Hoosick Valley had to outscore the Warriors by 10 points in the final quarter to break open a close game. Haley McNeese led the Hurricanes with 13 points. She had 4 3-pointers, and senior Taylor Garabedian and Abby Scalaba added 10 each. But this was a close game against kind of a rebuilding Wauconah team. John, they lost, obviously, the Gambaroni girl to injury. I believe she's going to be out for the whole year, which is a huge loss for Wauconah. And it's tough on Coach Kay there with those injuries.
Right. Then you had Wigington. I think she went to prep school, so you lose your 2 top scorers coming into the season. But give Wauconah credit; they really competed at Hoosick. They've won a game on the road.
Right.
I think that's the difference between a smaller school and a little bit of a larger school like Wauconah, where they have a little more depth on their team, and some players are stepping up. I think I saw their coach talk about after the Wauconah Hoosick game that a young lady who was a senior who didn't get a ton of playing time the last 3 years, gets her opportunity and steps up and scores double digits in that game. They keep them close and give them a chance to win. And on the Hoosick side of things, you got to be impressed with them. That's the second time they've come back in their first 4 games and won with a fourth quarter comeback. So that's a good sign, and that's a sign of a senior team with Garabedian, with Shea, McNeese, Shalaba. They have 4 solid seniors, and along with their point guard LaSure, that's a tough battle-tested team, and then you have Emma Meswar stepping in too. So,
right.
So it's a good start for Hoosick. They had a really tough one down at Pittsfield the other night. They lost. But Pittsfield's got a challenging team. It's a good matchup when they're pressing and making you work for it. And so I think even though Hoosick lost that game, they showed something by continuing to come back in the fourth quarter once again.
Right, and that game was tied at 45 after 3 quarters. Like you said, Pittsfield, a very, very competitive squad, very nice team. They're going to do something, I think, in the state tournament. But in that game, Hoosick Valley got some great contributions. Once again, Ashlyn LaSure, she led Hoosick Valley quietly with 16 points. Taylor Garabedian had 15. And again, Reagan Shea had 10 and Haley McNeese had 9. But as you indicated, those are, if there can be such a thing as a good loss, I guess that's a good loss because you're playing up in competition. And that was a nip and tuck battle between 2 very good teams. And again, you look at Hoosick Valley, they just have a lot of different pieces. They've got some senior leadership, and they have their point guard in Ashlyn LaSure, who makes it difficult for teams to press them and to she gets that offense going. She gets it set up. She's very composed, and she does a nice job at the point.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, she has a good ability to find players and get them the ball where they can score. They're another team. We talked about the boys last time I was here a few weeks ago, Hoosick, but the girls also put 4 or 5 players on the court every time that can score as well. So they're another tough matchup when you're trying to guard them. And Pittsfield sounded like they were pretty athletic and were pressing the whole game, but Hoosick kept making runs back at them in that game and really wouldn't go away.
Right.
And Coach Rassicott sounds like he's got a nice group of young talent and also some seniors at Pittsfield. So to battle and go at that, I agree. That's as a coach, you never want to lose, but if you want to classify, I agree. That's a good loss early in the season for their team just coming back at them. And they got some, obviously, Hoosick's going to play a tough schedule, so those games are going to make them even more difficult for their opponents down the stretch.
Our girls player of the week this week, for her efforts over the past week, Taylor Garabedian, consistent here. She had 10 points versus Wauconah. Good job on the backboards, 15 points against Pittsfield. And she does a lot for Coach Fredericks for Hoosick Valley. She's really their size, John, and she's expected to score and rebound, and she's having a nice year so far and doing a lot that she's being asked to do.
Yeah, she brings it every day. I mean, she's a tough player. She can score from outside. She's tough going to the basket with a variety of moves, going to attack the rim, and she just goes and plays hard for 32 minutes every night. You know, we saw her last year a couple times, and she had some foul trouble, but she's a smart player too, and she can play in those situations when she has some fouls. So it's nice to have a senior that leads you like that can both set the tone on the offense and the defensive end of the court, and that's a real bonus for Coach Frederick's team, having her back again.
And so far they stand at 3-1, and they have they're off until after the new year. Next week they play their next games at home to Lee and Munson. So they get a chance to stay at home and improve on their record of 3-1. On the boys' side of things, John, McCann Tech, they picked up a nice road win at Hamden Charter, 59-54 now, to even their record in the league at 1-1. They're now 3-1 overall, and the best part of that game was that 4 Hornets scored in double figures, with Eric Rougeau leading the way with 17, followed by the consistent Walt Mazza with 13, and Jake and Zach Holland each added 10. Now they're off again. We're talking about this break until they play Duggan Academy at home on Friday, January 5th. So next Friday, they are home, and then they play the next day at home against Mount Greylock. So they've got a big break here, and they're going to have to wait and a little bit now until they get back in action. But that's a nice win for McCann Tech, and they're off to a good start, Joe.
Right. If you're going to have that break, you want to go into it on positive, and they certainly have with a 3-1 start. They're getting good balanced scoring from, as you mentioned, from Mazza, from Rougeau, from the Hollands. When you can put multiple players on the court that are going to score for you, that makes you even more challenging and difficult to guard. And you know, I think sure during this 2-week break they've had, this is a chance with a veteran team to really give Coach Bullitt a chance to get them ready for those tough games against Dugan and against Mount Greylock boys, who have been playing better as well. So that's a good stretch, and you want to come out of that ready to play. And I'm sure that these 2 weeks have really given them a chance to step up and be ready. And also, again, you get a little break, you get some players healthy, and you go into that stretch in January, which is so key with your team healthy and ready to go.
Mount Greylock, even their record at 2-2. Now, John, coming from behind in the fourth quarter to defeat Turner's Falls 52-47, and Ward Bianchi and Nolan Barnes led the scoring for the Mounties with 13 apiece, and Noah Kane Smalls added 12. So they now have even their record at 2-2. They're 2-0, more importantly, in their league. And this young Mount Greylock team seems like it's starting to come around now, John.
Yeah, it's impressive. They're 2-2 now. Both wins are on the road. This last one, they jumped out to a big lead, and then Turner's Falls came storming back to take the lead at the half by a point, but they didn't get. They kept their composure. They didn't panic, and they won by 5 points on the road. So those are, again, the kind of games that make you grow up as a young team. Nolan Barnes, only a freshman, scoring 13 to lead them along with Ward Bianchi. So they're getting contributions from some seniors that maybe are getting their first chance to play meaningful minutes, and some freshmen that are stepping in and playing those minutes as well. So this is a team that's going to keep getting better and better as the year goes on, and they're going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and like I said, in their league, I believe they're going to be very competitive in their league. They're undefeated right now. They are playing tonight at home against Lee, and then, of course, they go on the road next week to a very good Pioneer Valley team. Pioneer, this is a team that if you get a chance to see them, they will be playing at Drury, I know, later in the season. I think they're also going to be playing at Hoosick Valley later in the season. This is a team you want to see, Pioneer. But right now, they're undefeated in their league, which is going to hold up well for them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to say that I liked what their coach said in the right after the Drury game. He said, I wanted them to figure it out.
Right.
And I think that's great when because a lot of times you see the players looking over like coach called timeout, and he's like, no, figure it out. So it was a good learning point for them. He wanted them to understand that they've been practicing on the things, was I think what he emphasized afterwards, they've been practicing the things that Drury was throwing at them. Of course, you're playing against a team like Drury. It's very athletic and experienced. That's going to be a little more challenging than you're seeing from your younger players in practice. However, he was giving them a chance to grow up and learn from that, and that's going to only pay dividends for them down the stretch in their league.
The Drury Blue Devils played Mahar, their only game during this period. They dropped a 54-49 decision at Mahar. They trailed by 4 at the half, but they took a lead into the fourth quarter. They had some difficulty scoring in that fourth quarter, but that's nothing to be ashamed of. This is a good Mahar team. I saw them scrimmage Hoosick Valley earlier in the year, and they were impressive. So this is, I believe, one of those so-called good losses. I'm sure Coach Reset would probably disagree with me, but on the road to this team, they were in this game, and more importantly, they got a great effort out of the freshman Jorge Bond, who led them with 11 points. And this is a young Drury Blue Devil team with really their only senior Dante Dillard, but Jorge Bond had 11. The junior Sam Mormon had 10 points and 12 rebounds, and he's really starting to assert himself. Junior Miles Beauchamp had 9, and Dillard finished with 8. But right now, Drury stands at 3-2 overall, and of course, we're going to be covering them the game of the week, which will be on next week against Lennox. Coach Reset, I'm sure, is not happy to be at 3-2. Nobody wants to lose, but this is a young, growing team, and I really think they're going to be a handful as this season goes along, John. I really do.
They're getting good balance. They're getting Sam Mormon scoring double points and getting double digits in rebounds. Bond, Dillard, Beauchamp are all scoring in double digits, so here and there. So they're getting 2, 3, 4 players scoring double digits, but I think the key thing is like in this game on the road. So who's your go-to player when it comes down to fourth quarter? And that's, I'm sure, something that Coach Reset's working on with his team, that it's great to have that balance, but you also got to find out with your young team who is ready to make shots in the fourth quarter. Because making shots in the first quarter, second quarter is important. Those are all, every basket counts, as we know. But, who's going to step up? The last couple of years, they've had players like Louis Gelati and Scott McGuire, and players that you knew were going to step up in crunch time. But when these young players are in the fourth quarter, who's going to take the good shots? And we were talking earlier, too, about, in those situations, who's going to take good shots, too?
Good shots, correct.
Because if you're forcing up shots in those key moments of the game, that leads to your opponent getting opportunities going the other way. So it's important that teams are working on how they get shots and what shots they want at crucial points in the game. And I'm sure, if I know Jack, he's working on that with his team. And it'll be fun to watch him play Lennox tonight.
Right, and it seems like John, that defensively, and it's always the case with a Coach Reset team, they're really doing a good job. No team has been able to score a lot of points against them, so they're obviously working hard on defense, which is always a signature of a Drury Blue Devil team. And when that offense comes around, and usually offense takes a little bit longer to come around than the defense, and I think they're going to be a real tough out as the season goes along.
Definitely. I believe it was the first game where Sam Mormon talked about, Coach tells us hold teams under 50, and we'll figure out a way to get those 50 points to win the game. And that's a good mentality for a young player to have, a young team to have, is that if you can hold teams, you can play defense, they're going to be nice when your shot may not be falling for whatever reason, but there's no excuse not to play good defense every night. I know Coach Reset, that's part of his philosophy with his team, to make sure that they keep themselves in every single game by how hard to defend, by not allowing second shots, and by taking good shots on the other end of the court. So this will be a nice matchup because Lennox always has a good veteran team tonight.
Right.
And that'll lead into some good matchups coming up for Drury in the future, including a stretch on the road against some good opponents with Greenfield and I was writing this down, Frontier, Hopkins, and Greenfield. So that's a tough 3-game stretch on the road they've got coming in early January. So it's going to be important to take care of business at home so they're prepared for those tough road games.
Absolutely. Hoosick Valley remained undefeated, winning their only game during this stretch by topping Belchertown at home 74-53. And they got a breakout night from Joey McGovern, who scored 23 on 5 3-pointers. They got other balanced scoring from their senior forward, Frank Field, who had 17. Aiden Wicks contributed 12, and the 8th grader, Trevor Moynihan, had 11. Quinnell Bradley had 9 and did a great job on the boards. And a great victory for them. So they stand undefeated at 4-0. And this is a team we talked a little bit about, John. This is a team that can score some points.
I guess so. I mean, 4 games, averaging almost 75 points a game. We're just talking about the previous team about holds them under 50. If they hold them under 50, they win by 25. So it's impressive that how they've come out firing in the first 4 games, scoring points. You don't normally see that as much in this time of the year, but the fact that they're scoring like that early shows that they're taking advantage of their opportunities both in the half court and the full court, and I'm sure that's being keyed by some defensive effort as well. So when you can put this many players on the court that can score, I mean, you look at it, it's like, Field has 17, Wicks has 12, McGovern has 23, and you got an 8th grader in Moynihan scoring double digits. So, and Bradley can score in a variety of ways as well. So this is an impressive start for Hoosick Valley, and their game coming up against Monument next week is going to be really a special one to watch.
Right. Speaking of that, our game of the week next week is the game between Hoosick Valley and Monument Mountain, and we're going to be covering it. That's Wednesday, January 3rd at Hoosick Valley, and Northern Berkshire Community Television will be there. And both these teams are undefeated, John. They're 2 of the 3 undefeated teams in Berkshire County, the other being the Lennox Girls. But both these teams are going to go into that game undefeated. And this game will feature really a head-to-head matchup between 2 of the better players in Berkshire County. That head-to-head matchup between Frank Field and Khalil Carlson. Both seniors. Carlson, 1,000-point scorer already. Field knocking on the door. He's only about 22 or 23 points from 1,000. And these are 2 people, 2 players that can really fill it up in a variety of ways, John.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing these 2 players match up. 2 of the most talented players in the county, both undefeated teams. Having the game being moved to Wednesday night only increases the fact that it should be a really nice crowd like it always is at Hoosick. But Monument just played at Pittsfield on the Saturday right before the Christmas holiday, and had a huge crowd. They talked about in the write-up how there were multiple teams there getting a chance to watch them play. So I'm sure, I got to believe that the Hoosick team was right there watching them. And, got a little sneak peek at them, and they're another team with a 2-week break before they play this game. So knowing Coach Robinson, he's had plenty of time to drill into his players what they what Monument does, what they're going to do to try and stop it, and how they're going to try to attack them on offense. So this should be a real special matchup. And if Wednesday the 3rd is available on your schedule, I'd suggest going to watch.
Yeah, go on. You'll see some great high school basketball players in Berkshire County, and interesting game, interesting matchup, John. Hoosick Valley, I think, has a little bit of an advantage on the speed end of it, but the size advantage is definitely with Monument.
Right.
That's going to be an interesting matchup for these 2 teams.
Yeah, this will be a good test right early in the early part of the season for both teams. I know Monument last year gave Taconic a real good battle in the state tournament.
Yes.
And Taconic team won the state title last year. So, the returning players that were prominent in that game, such as Carlson. So it's going to be interesting to see, how each team handles the runs. And we always talk about that with our players. It's easy to play the game when you're playing against somebody you're better than, right? So how do you respond when you get a lot of adversity in that game? You have a player that, you do everything you can, they still score. How do you match up against that? And sometimes you may do everything right too, and they're going to shut you down. So that's a great thing about basketball. It's 32 minutes of flow, and there's going to be some highs and some lows during that game. And how do the boys respond to that? How do they respond as a team? How do they handle that with composure? And that's a key component that is sometimes underrated in a big matchup like that, is how do you keep your composure, stick together as your team, and execute what your coach is telling you for your game plan under those tough atmosphere conditions.
And you're always going to, what you're going to get from players like Carlson and Field, but it's also the other players for Hoosick Valley, Joey McGovern, Aiden Wicks, for Monument Mountain, Manny Brown, Griffin McElroy. These are good supporting players that for each of these teams. So, but sometimes it's those players that spell the difference.
Definitely. Who steps up in that circumstance? Because you're scoring they win against Belchertown by 20. Belchertown's a good team, and these, multiple players scored double figures. Who's going to step up and score double digits or some big baskets against Monument? When the game's tight and it's a big tournament atmosphere. So that's the fun part about these kind of games.
Yeah.
Who steps up and who is the player that we're talking about Field and Carlson, but what player that is not on that prominent radar comes in and shows that they belong in that game and gives their team big points.
Yeah, and our player of the week, speaking of big points, our player of the week on the boys' side this week, Joey McGovern, the senior from Hoosick Valley, who had 23 points against Belchertown. He had a huge fourth quarter where he hit 4 3-pointers in a row at one point. And he can fill it up. There's no question about that. It's a question for him of taking good shots. And when he does, he's tough. He can shoot it up with anybody.
Yeah, as a senior in that game, he's going to need to step up and play big minutes and score 23 points, take good shots, play both ends of the court, and stay on the court, because it's certainly important that you keep your veteran players involved and out of foul trouble and able to play their game in these big, challenging matchups.
Right. And remember, High School Basketball Weekly is shown every week, Thursday night at 7:30. We rebroadcast it again Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and then Sunday at 7 p.m. And immediately following High School Basketball Weekly is our high school game of the week. And this week, it will be a rebroadcast of the Drury Mount Greylock girls game, which Rick and John covered. You'll see that one immediately following High School Basketball Weekly. And next week, immediately following High School Basketball Weekly, you'll see our game of the week between Monument and Hoosick Valley. And as John indicated, if you're not doing anything next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, get up to Hoosick Valley. You'll see some real fine basketball action. Well, that's going to do it for us here on High School Basketball Weekly this week. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week on High School Basketball Weekly.